Hello, everybody. I'm Dan Curtis-Cummins, lecturer in the first year writing program and director of experimental college at SF State. I am here to talk to you about the awesome social reading tool, Hypothesis, to transform reading from a private, solitary act to a vibrant social space of learning. So it's especially helpful during remote learning, but also for all reading-centered pedagogy. So let's start with some theory, because who doesn't like a little theory in their life? This here is my friend Remy Collier, who a group of colleagues and I met 2 years ago in the fall of 2018 when we were developing our marginal syllabus project. So this is a professional reading group, and the marginal syllabus project that we organized was around Asao Inoue's book, Anti-Racist Writing Assessment Ecologies. Remy Collier founded the original marginal syllabus, which is a much broader professional reading group of teachers from K through 12 all over the country, and university teachers as well, all brought together by the social reading tool of Hypothesis. So Remy Collier taught us about the concepts of open web annotation, couched in a larger theory of open pedagogy and collaborative inclusive learning. We have to consider, whenever we talk about this, access to technology and how that impacts equity and inclusion in our teaching, which is definitely something we should keep at the forefront of our minds through this presentation. But open web annotation, as says here, creates texts as context for collaborative learning through an open invitation for shared activity. So these open web these texts now become, instead of those private places for learning or acts of learning, these texts on the web, the open web, now become these spaces for learning, and not only individual learning, but social learning, collaborative learning. The sources on the web are free of cost, they're accessible. We create these spaces for social learning, and in these spaces, students can start to really create and read each other's content in the margins. So the idea of open pedagogy is this deeper kind of theoretical foundation where students take creating content a bit further. So they're not only just creating annotations in the margins and engaging with each other's annotations, but also now they're able to bring in their own course content through Hypothesis and by setting it up with Hypothesis to engage their peers and myself. So the big difference here is that we're not dependent on the instructor to bring all of the course materials, set them up, facilitate the learning environment. We're now inviting students into this pedagogy, into this open pedagogy, and allowing them to create these learning spaces as well. And so really this is a pinnacle, some level of critical pedagogy, of some active learning pedagogy, and integrates and comes together, synthesizes with open web annotation. So for reference, and because we've been discussing multiple annotation platforms on our campus here, we want to look at the main difference here between Hypothesis and Perusall. Perusall is one of the new ones that's come up, which is the ability for students to learn and transfer and take ownership over this social learning tool of Hypothesis. So with Hypothesis and with the way that I'm going to show you how I set it up in my classes, students are able to now kind of take this tool and take this learning to their other classes, to other parts of their life, maybe including leadership and study groups and other collaborative learning spaces that they create outside of our classrooms. And they can do all of this with Hypothesis as a free open access tool on the web. So this is also one of the reasons I don't embed Hypothesis into my LMS, into the iLearn program, because when you do, it works similar to Perusall. Basically, you are the only ones as the instructor who can upload single PDFs from within the course shell, and students have no agency to bring their course content or set up Hypothesis on their own. So for your teaching preferences, you may want to integrate it into iLearn, and in that case, Perusall and Hypothesis are actually quite similar. You can see on this comparison here. If you want to read a more in-depth comparison, the link at the bottom of the slides here, which you will have access to at the end, is an interesting article. So to demonstrate how Hypothesis really allows students to create content and engage with each other's content in the margins, let me take you through the first couple weeks of my course, starting on day 1. So Hypothesis is foundational to the open pedagogy that we create together in my class, as well as it can be used to really help you engage with many of the social and/or racial justice themes of your course. So that is what I do. I have students engage with Hypothesis on day 1. We do in-class social reading of Theme for English B by Langston Hughes. So then after that, I send them off to read the syllabus and annotate the syllabus and the grading contract after the first class. So that day 1 activity allows me to help students set up Hypothesis in class, set up their free account. I learned quickly that students get overwhelmed with new technology and cause some undue stress at home and shape their whole experience with Hypothesis. So if I can take some extra time in class to help them set that up and troubleshoot with them, show them exactly why I like Hypothesis with their activity, then I will do that. So I make a screenshot guide for them. In person, if we were teaching in a classroom, I would hand this out, print it out and hand it out, but remotely a Google Doc works just fine. And even though I do take them through the steps on the screen, this is basically the plan B for anyone who might have slow internet or loses a connection or misses something while I'm explaining. So I also set up the poem with this link via Hypothesis. So number 2 there, the via Hypothesis, if you set that up preceding any URL for any website, it'll automatically embed the tools of Hypothesis on that website, regardless of the browser. Another way to set up Hypothesis and to encourage your students to do so is to install the extension on Chrome, which I'll show you with our textbook later. I start the activity on iLearn with all this technology. It's important to keep it central on your class website and then go from there. And then the real important part of this activity, the reason that I tell students I love Hypothesis so much is because I'm able to reply to each student after the first day, creating that connection and that interaction right away through the text. And then the next class, day 2, after we've kind of talked about the syllabus and the grading contract, we return to the poem to exclusively read the margins, to exclusively read how I replied to everyone and how they can reply to each other. So to take them through setting up their account, I set up this little screenshot guide. And we see where we were coming from on iLearn. I tell them, as you click onto the poem here and get to Theme for English B, before you start reading, or before we start reading as a class, click on that upper right-hand corner and click the sign up button. You'll go through the steps to create your password and username, and you'll get a verification email. I always tell them to check their spam folder. It usually goes there, but usually people can set this up within about 5 or 6 minutes. And then before we start, I tell them, let's all stay on this screenshot guide really quick to give you a little bit of what to expect. When you get into Hypothesis, you'll start highlighting, you'll see the annotate, click, and then Hypothesis shows up. But what does annotate mean? So since it's the first day of class and students often have preconceptions of what it means to annotate, I give them a brief definition and I basically tell them it's more than just summarizing. It's to add anything to the conversation that you're engaged in with your author and maybe with each other eventually. So to annotate is to write as you read and to add any connections, reactions, relevant experiences, and importantly, questions. And I try to tell them open-ended questions, which we work on all semester. So open-ended questions that can start discussion. And then I throw out this idea, and to annotate collaboratively means to engage in a dialogue and to really start to have a little bit of a conversation back and forth with other readers in the margins. And then quickly let them know that, yes, this tool is something we'll be using all year long. So 104, 105 class. And so it will be a useful tool. So let's get to the poem. And I'll show you really quickly how these students can start to engage with each other and create this content in the margins. and have these really important foundational conversations in my class. So if we got to the page on the first day, we could click this little eyeball button to kind of show what students would see on a blank slate. And when they clicked there, they would click this little arrow in the right-hand corner and come up, and it would usually say sign up or log in. I'm having them sign up. When everyone signed up, now we read the poem out loud, and as people start to annotate, I tell them, note your favorite lines, and I'll give you some time after we read out loud to write 2 or 3 annotations. So after that time that they've had to write their annotations, and after 3 classes, you can see that there's a total of 71 annotations on this one page. All right. That includes my replies and other people's replies to each other and annotated. And I might ask some people to share. So volunteers can read their lines and we can have a discussion about some of the themes that we've bringing up with this poem and some of the important practices that we're starting to establish. So I always hope somebody will bring up this line, I hear you, hear me, we two, you, me, talk on this page. And I love to frame reading and writing as social interactions and how we will talk on this page throughout the semester, particularly in the weekly labor journals that they engage in as part of the labor contract. I also always try to get to some themes of racial justice, of belonging, challenging traditional power dynamics in the classroom, of rethinking grading, which segues into our discussion of the grading contract on the next day, and ultimately to major themes of identity, self-defining and questioning your identity in college writing classrooms, which is a big theme also in this central stanza that Hughes brings up. And how to represent yourself and your identity in your writing, right? And that's kind of what the whole poem is about. So these larger foundational themes really set the tone of our discussions throughout the year and really also set the tone for the value of hypothesis for social collaborative learning throughout the year. So after that, I get a good sense of who's who. I can pick out their usernames and I keep track of them, and this is how I keep them accountable in the labor contract for their reading labor. So usually we agree on 3 to 6 annotations per reading. So if you click on your little icon, person icon there, and click on your name, you can see all of my annotations, okay, over the past 2 years. But what I want to do is search just for this one student. And now I can see all of the annotations that she's left throughout the semester so far, all on the one dashboard page. And so easy for me to click in here, kind of see what type of annotation she's leaving. We've got Malcolm X learning to read there. She left 2 annotations. And the last thing I want to show you is that on this dashboard page, you can visit annotations in context and see exactly where the discussion was happening and who else was interacting. So if you click annotations in context, it'll show that one annotation if you want to show all 11. What I'm showing you here is a classroom exercise that we did just the other day where I was teaching them multimodal annotations. And so I left an example. I told them I'm going to leave the boring ones so you can find better ones, but we were trying to complement the textbook that we're using in this class, which is actually the open educational resource that Jolie Gorgian and I have developed for a composition and for anybody to use at SF State. So I wanted to show them how we can add multimodal annotations to complement what we're reading in the text, and that they can do that with any class to bring in visual texts or videos that might help them understand the written text better. So that was what we were talking about, multimodal reading and multimodal annotating. And I gave them the instructions on how to add an image to their annotations in the margins, and then in pairs, they practice that. And then they came back, and through this content that they searched and found on the web, they explained their visual, and we got a full picture of how to put together a quote sandwich through all of their research. What other colleagues do to increase the collaboration and make it a little more intimate between the students is to put them into smaller groups, and then either have them create a hypothesis reading group themselves, or you create it for them. The way you have them do that is to click on public up here. You'll see all of my groups that I've been a part of over the years, but if you scroll all the way to the bottom, you click new private group, and that takes you to a page that generates a group name. Encourage your students to be creative. And then this link at the bottom is what you can either use to invite new members by email, or have your students have one leader create the group and invite their classmates to join the group. And like I said, keeps the annotations and the interaction a little bit more intimate and focused. I don't do this until the third project. Usually just keep them either in a whole class group or just annotate it in public. Let's see how that goes. So that's the brief introduction. A colleague and I, Jolie Gorgin, have made a longer video showing many of the dynamic and quite rigorous ways that Jolie engages her students with hypothesis in her comparative and world literature classes. Please reach out if you have any questions or if I can clarify anything about hypothesis. Otherwise, I will say that the help page is super useful. Jeremy Dean is the VP of Education, so he works specifically with instructors on college campuses. And then, like I said, Dr. Remy Kalir is our old buddy, and he's newly the scholar in residence, and will be working with us as well as any other campuses who want to pilot hypothesis across their entire campus. And then I will just say that if I can help you in any way, please contact me. The slides are available at this bit.ly address there. Thank you all for watching. I hope you enjoy hypothesis and that it works out well for you.